It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, Citizen-Made Radio.
Kia ora and welcome to Emergence News. Nice to have your company on this program. And for more information about this program, you can always visit our website, Share International website, which is shareinternational.org. For more information, you can visit the Share International magazine webpage at shareinternational.org also. And you can also find us at our radio homepage, and that's at plainsfm.org.nz. So there you go. There's plenty of ways to make contact with us, guys.
Oh,
John?
Hold on. You're not encouraging people to contact us, are you? I like remaining anonymous.
You're in the wrong game. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Nigel. Yes.
Are you keeping good health?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yeah, you were just telling my wife and I before we came on air about a product that fights cancer.
Oh, anti-cancer. Yeah, there's been quite a lot over the years written about it. ESIAC, it's called, and it comes originally from the Canadian Indians.
Yes. And
it's an ancient recipe. And it involves, well, you can buy it in a powder, actually, in New Zealand, and it involves funny things like rhubarb root, sheep sorrel, the hull of the black walnut tree, and there's another ingredient. Anyway, you can buy it in a powdered form, and it's you make it up yourself. And
and
you know,
could you use it as a preventative measure?
Yes, you do. You do, and it just sort of. I was saying to your wife, it sort of has all these items have an astringent sort of effect, and it's sort of like you can imagine the cancer cells sort of curling up and
in horror.
In horror.
And John, you were talking about harmlessness on a recent program, and it got me thinking because when you were talking about harmlessness, you were talking about attachment in the same breath, and you were talking about not getting too attached to the good things, the good stuff. And you know, that turned my whole perspective on detachment upside down. I was like, oh my goodness. The good stuff in life, you've got to make sure you don't get too attached. And it started making me think about being a parent and a grandparent. You've got to love your kids, you've got to look after them, you've got to support them. But you don't want to be too emotionally attached to the child. Otherwise, you can't let them go. You can't let them live their own life.
And you smother them.
Exactly.
And you smother them
and
with your
then they
insecurities.
become dysfunctional.
Yeah. And you smother them with your insecurities. Being detached about love is probably the biggest challenge.
I was just thinking because our job as a parent is already difficult enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, getting the right balance. And then along comes John who talks about don't get too attached to the good stuff, especially love. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
The stuff that Maitreya talks about the most is don't get attached to spiritual powers. And I think this is very interesting because you do see well-meaning teachers and gurus and spiritual advisors and leaders, and they get to a certain point and you can see them getting swamped by their ego. And I think what's happened is in a sincere personal growth, so they're starting to get spiritual enlightenment, they're starting to move along the evolutionary path. And then some of that good stuff starts happening. Some of those spiritual powers come in, and all of a sudden they're making love to all their followers, and they just lose it.
Well, there's some well-documented examples of that.
You know, so they get it. I think what's happening is they're getting attached to their spiritual power.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Rather than going, this is part of the process. I can't jump into that waka and paddle it furiously.
And isn't it interesting how Jesus of Nazareth even said, don't get too attached to spiritual powers because if you do, they will destroy you. They are not yours. Isn't that interesting? They're not ours.
Yeah.
It's just a tool that is available to us when we have reached a certain evolutionary point, but do not abuse it.
Yeah, and they're gifts. You know, what we say is,
yeah.
this is my power, this is mine. Actually, it's not.
No.
It's part of the divine process entering into your vehicles.
Yeah, you just sort of open up to it, don't you?
Yeah.
And it.
You haven't developed it, you know.
And if you're below the sort of 3-degree point of evolution, then the astral centres are a bit too dominant.
If you're below 3, you're a liar and a cheat anyway.
and susceptible to egoic responses. John, tell me, what are you looking at today?
Well, I've gone back to harmlessness. I've gone back to Benjamin Creme's books because I was aware that during that discussion that we had on harmlessness, I'm not very good at it.
Yes, I won't quote how you described yourself on the last podcast. And Peter, what have you got lined up today? I see the Share International. Is that the latest issue?
Yes, well, I've got 3 of them here actually. The 3 last ones that have come through, because I've been going back through them, and these. It doesn't matter how much you cover. There's still a lot more. And the first one I've got is Gambling Gestures by the Master, and I thought that was particularly apt. And also In Favour of Love. I'm going to cover something on that one. And that's from the July-August Share International.
Okay. I remember on a previous podcast recently you covered a editor's comment, which we had much discussion on. And I was just looking at the latest Share International magazine, the October issue, October 24. Editor's comment, Dear America.
Oh, Nigel, don't read that out, mate. We'll have American warships in our harbours if you read that out.
Well, they do say that the Americans play an important role in the world because just as each country has its own divine destiny, America has been assigned an amazing chance to be real heroes and literally save us all. Be so careful when you go out to vote next month.
Oh.
Yeah.
And Bernie
That's
Sanders.
me holding my breath.
Bernie Sanders is working tirelessly at the moment. He
Yeah.
says we've got to do everything in our power
Yes.
to make sure that we don't make the wrong decision.
I am reminded by a quote from Benjamin Creme around America, and he calls it an adolescent bully that is too strong and is flexing its muscle. And he talks about the humiliation of America that is yet to come. And I suspect if Donald Trump wins this election,
That humiliation
that humiliation will begin.
realised. And on that sombre note, we'll take a break and we'll be back with John next here on Emergence News.
This is the Emergence News on Plains FM. For more information, go to shareinternational.org.
Well, thanks, Nigel. Listen, after that last discussion on harmlessness, I went back into my man cave and hid for a bit. And I realised that we've covered harmlessness a number of times. So, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to manage my life through the lens of Maitreya's teachings. So we talked about harmlessness a couple of programs. Well, maybe I raised it. Anyway, Nigel's take on harmlessness was his understanding that the power of words could work for good or ill. His practice of harmlessness was through language. The word iron tongue came to mind, the power of words. I guess that this power is one of the first we learn as children.
Can I just come in there and just elaborate a little bit? I did say it's a work in progress. Okay?
Yeah, but you're better than me at this. Anyway, the destructive power of words. It is directed at us from a really early age. And so we learn to use iron tongue to retaliate, to protect ourselves and to finally manipulate and maybe dominate others. Iron tongue. Peter, the wiser older guy sitting in the corner, when referencing harmlessness, used the term goodwill. Goodwill towards others, goodwill towards humanity. And that carries him. He practices that well. My observation was that I was not good at harmlessness. And during that last program, I spoke of my irritation, anger and frustration. I am aggressive and irritable. I lunge at confrontation. I swear and rant. I'm high maintenance.
And I wondered at the time, why does everybody love you still?
Well, there's only 2 of us in this room. Anyway, sometimes I'm like that. Other times I'm okay. Now, this got me thinking. The energy and self-improvement, personal growth or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, seems to ebb and flow. It doesn't arrive at once in a large chunk permeating all areas of our lives simultaneously and evenly. Here's an example of this. Many years ago, I watched footage of a very serious tidal wave that struck Thailand, causing death and destruction. It did not arrive as a giant wall of water, as often predicted in fiction. It crept in, low and slow and innocent looking, but it just didn't stop. That was its power. It crept in, and once there, it just kept coming, bigger and bigger. The bulk arrived, but first it came in low. Sometimes I think that change comes the same way, not like a massive wall of water, but low and slow, creeping under your door and then pushing the door open, irresistibly. I think maybe divinity arrives the same way. Personal growth, spiritual awakening, enlightenment. Not like a massive wall of water pushing all destructively in front of it, but low and slow, until it has built such mass that it overwhelms all. So, back to harmlessness. It's at low tide for me. The trickle had started. I was getting good at some stuff, but the tide has receded. It was tentative and it's soaked away. And it's because I've realised I've stopped practising it. I've forgotten that you must practice it. I have slipped from my practice. In my involvement with the grind of daily life, and honestly some of that is very pleasant indeed, my mind slips back to a neutral position, almost autopilot. Not got it into gear, and I'm not aiming my mind, and I mean practising, at anything in general. The life we want takes focus and practice. So I've returned to Benjamin Creme, his book, The Art of Living, Living Within the Laws of Life. And I'm looking at page 19, and of course, he starts with the law of karma. Here's what he says. The law of karma, the law of cause and effect, is the great governing all of our existence. Every thought, every action we make sets in motion a cause. The effects stemming from these causes make our life for good or ill. We do it to ourselves, because this law substands the human condition on planet Earth. We are bound by it. There is nothing we can do about it except be harmless. I thought that was particularly interesting. So I flick through page 44. He's asked, what can you say about harmlessness and harmfulness? How do we practice harmlessness? Benjamin Creme comes back with, the best way to practice harmlessness is to practice detachment. The more detached you are, the more harmless you will be. The masters say that the law of karma is a beneficent law, and generally we have more good karma than bad. Some people find that hard to believe, but that may be just self-pity. So practice. It is to do with intention. Of course, we must practice harmlessness. And I thought I might come back to some of that a bit later on, because he talks at length about this relationship between karma, reincarnation, and harmlessness. So I kind of want to wrap up with, I love words, I love their meaning, I love their significance, and I love their sounds, but I have struggled to grasp the word harmlessness. It's a chunk of a word. It doesn't roll around in my mouth comfortably. So I've gone to some other words that I'm playing with to get onto the road to harmlessness. I've thought about kindness. I can do kindness. I've thought about gentleness. I think I can do gentleness. I've thought about patience. I've thought about gratitude. I can do some of those things. I can certainly be more kind and gentler. And I am experiencing gratitude.
This is Emergence News. Welcome to the program. If you haven't joined us before, this program is dedicated to the emergence, information regarding the emergence and reappearance of a world teacher and the masters of wisdom. And that's pretty momentous news, isn't it? When you think about it, guys, it's probably the biggest news story on the planet, and hardly anyone except us three, talk about it
That's true.
in the media. But it is momentous, isn't it? How often do the masters of wisdom materialise and walk amongst us? It hasn't happened for
98,000 years.
That's right. So it is quite momentous. And although we do have a spiritual teacher that walks amongst us, that happens in each age, doesn't it, John?
Yeah.
And there's been a number of well-known ones, the Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, the
Jesus. And they inaugurate
New Ages.
a new age. Yes. Yeah. So it's a natural, normal process for planet Earth and humanity is to have a teacher come at important, critical times in our development. We're just getting another one.
And he's taking his time because, as you said earlier on the program, sometimes spiritual development or the unfoldment of one's personal growth and development, it's a gradual thing. It's not like a wall that's
arriving at once. Yep.
No, it's the tide gently coming in. And I'm experiencing Maitreya's emergence. That's how I'm experiencing the emergence. It's taking time because we need to be ready when he arrives. And we're not ready yet.
No, it's a trickle. And I think there's a couple of things that are sitting in his emergence way. Firstly, timing, and there's some karmic, I guess, Peter, cosmic kind of timing there, certainly solar timing.
That's right. The energies have to be right from the... not just the solar, but, the bigger systems as well.
Yeah. Secondly, we need to be practicing some degree of peace. We need to be moving away from war. And we need to be moving into an environment where there is the start of this concept of sharing. And finally, I think, and we are becoming more and more aware of this, the lords of materialism, that group of highly evolved individuals that have got us enthralled to material matter, to wealth, to fun, competition, are fighting a tremendous rearguard action. And we are seeing that in all aspects of human endeavour.
Particularly politics. We keep electing these governments and coalition governments that are right-leaning and are looking after a small section of our society, but the vast majority, and especially those that need the most assistance and support, are not getting it.
Yeah, so that we are being constantly bombarded with a message that things must remain the same for us all to be happy. In fact, it's almost as though the word change has become a bad word. And yet many, many people on this planet, some millions, believe we need to change. Change the way we manage the planet, change the way we interact with each other.
Harmlessness.
As
best we can in all our relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter, on that note, it's over to you, sir.
Thanks, Nigel. Gambling Gestures. This is by the Master through Benjamin Creme from Share International magazine. Whenever men make a determined step into right relationship, there are always others who make an equally determined step into confrontation. Multitudes work and even die for greater freedom and justice, while other forces threaten the peace in a cynical attempts to consolidate their diminishing power. Meanwhile, humanity at large watches and trembles, witnessing with fear a renewal of ancient hatred, thought to be discarded and overcome. We, your elder brothers, too, watch carefully this dangerous ploy, but fear not. Common sense, we know, will force the acceptance of at least a precarious peace, with gains and losses balanced, more or less. From now on, this scenario will be repeated across the world, where the great powers attempt to maintain or even increase their power, knowing, however, that they must do so carefully without damaging the status quo. For how long can nations play this useless game? The only sensible course is to work together for peace and prosperity for all. Only in this way will they be ready, their people for the joy of peace. The prosperity of justice, and the bliss of sharing. And following on from this is an article in the Share International by Luke Gulori, in favour of love. Despite the presence of Maitreya in our midst, it seems that a wave of hatred is pervading the entire world at present. It is making its presence felt on all sides in a surge of ruthless violence, blind hatred and slaughter, which finds their climaxing expression in the genocidal massacre underway in Gaza Strip. The war is the war of humanity as a whole. Its resolution is the entire world's business. It's a major test for humanity to prove that it has the ability to express the inborn soul qualities of man, to put its spiritual will into action in order to teach compromise, unity, synthesis, common good, and to overcome the will to power, separation and hatred. Both the economic front and the political front seem to combine to prevent any deep and widespread change of direction occurring in the world affairs, as if the news world is unable to rise to the surface. Ancient habits die hard. This creates a very dangerous situation at the moment. To quote the late Indian philosopher Antonio Gramsci, the old world is dying. The new one takes a while to appear, just as John was talking about. And in this light of obscurity, monsters emerge. So the great advantage of favouring the forces of will to good is now that Maitreya and 14 of his masters are present in full physical presence in the world, as we know. Maitreya has decided not to appear publicly and obviously so far. Humanity must grasp the fact that such an externalization of the Christ and his masters requires a situation where humanity proves its readiness to change. We must have forgotten that the master comes only when the disciple is ready, as said in esotericism. Caught up maybe in our own aspiration and expectations, we also possibly tend to forget how difficult it is for the masters to adapt themselves to our world conditions. If we refer once more to Master DK's statement in the early 1940s, we may feel that little has changed. We have a world full of unrest, a world full of pain, sorrow and strife, a world in which the emotional bodies of humanity are in a condition of tremendous disturbance, a world in which animals, men, women and children suffer, agonize and die, a world in which hunger, sin, sickness, famine, rapine and murder stalk unarrested, a world in which the forms of religion exist, but the life is gone, in which science is prostituted to the ends of money and hate, and in which the produce of the earth is not for the sustenance of the race, but for nourishing of the purses of the few, a world in which faith is oft the subject of scoffing, in which unselfishness reigns supreme.
Look, just before we finish, Peter, just got a question for you and John. You mentioned, that article mentions the fact that the masters take time to make adjustments during the materialisation, reappearance process. Okay, they're a master of wisdom. They have gone through the whole process on the evolutionary path of being on Earth. Why does it take them time to make an adjustment to walking amongst us?
Do you mean them physically, or do you mean humanity at large?
Well, the conditions of humanity are so far away from their normal state of peace, isn't it?
So it's uncomfortable for the master, isn't it? It's energetically uncomfortable.
They've got to adjust to our lower vibration, which is must be tremendously difficult, I'd say.
Yeah, remember a while ago I talked about that we're at the bottom of the mud in the pond and we're aiming for the white sand beach off in the distance. And you can sometimes climb out of the mud at the bottom of the pond, and then you swim higher and higher to the area in the pond where the sunlight's penetrating. And then you can get your head above water and see the distant beach and start swimming. Well, if we're still in the mud, the master, the being that resides on the white sand beach, has to come into the water and lower themselves down. And as you say, Peter, it's a vibrationary process, and possibly difficult. Maybe it requires a lot of energy. Maybe it's uncomfortable. But also that comment you made about the master, the teacher can't appear until a student is ready. And that's another idea that Ben's covered off, that actually we have to behave better before the teacher can come. All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.